Welcome to the Develop Yourself podcast, where we teach you everything you need to land your first job as a software developer by learning to develop yourself, your skills, your network, and more. I'm Brian, your host. In this episode of the Develop Yourself podcast, I'll be speaking with Megan to talk about all things career-related, especially a lot of the misinformation we hear online about what you should be doing through resume, myths about LinkedIn. Megan's a top 1% career coach, meaning she's one of the top 1% of all contractors that do career coaching on UpWork, which is pretty amazing. So she knows what she's talking about. There's so much misinformation out there about what you should be doing and just a lot of confusion, which I'm hoping to clear up. So I hope you get a lot out of this episode. I also want to let you know that Parsity is committed to transparency in our career statistics. Megan and I are working on those, and we should have those out along with a brand new website in the next month or so. So please check that out when you get a chance. I can't wait to show you the new website and also get those stats to you as part of our commitment to transparency. That's enough for me. Get back to the episode. Hope you enjoy it. See you around. Today, I'm with Megan Diaz, part of the top 1% of career coaches on UpWork, and we're lucky enough to call her our career services coordinator at Parsity. I'm really excited to chat with you today about the job developer market, your experience helping people in software get into their first role, and resumes, all the stuff that people want to know about that I feel there's a lot of misinformation, opinions, anecdotal evidence, basically what the heck people need to do to get hired.
Yes. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to talk to our audience about all the things.
Yeah. I mean, I actually did a video / newsletter recently about the tech job market. And it's one of those really emotional topics. I have my own opinions on it, and some of it's based on anecdotal evidence. Some of it's based on what I see in hired reports and things like that, and U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. My general take on it was, hey, it's not great, but there's no reason you shouldn't become a developer. And I got a lot of negative feedback on that, which I thought was interesting. And I was like, oh, and I hear this this story that's proliferating, the media and social media is the fear mongering aspect of no one can get hired. Don't become a developer. It's more than just learn to code nowadays. But there's a lot more to it, which I'm really curious to get your take on, because just working with you a little bit has given me a different perspective on what the reality is of the market. I'm just curious, what have you seen over the last 5-10 years, maybe? How has the market changed as far as software developer hiring landscape?
I think in the last 5-ish years, there's a lot more boot camps out there. There's so many, not only in Silicon Valley, but now remote, and just it's very competitive. So the companies or the boot camps that do have a full career services program or someone dedicated to that, I think that is an additional value add to them, because obviously the whole goal of completing a program is to get a job in that industry, in that field. And I think today's market has just changed a lot, and just the nuances of how to job search. It's no longer a numbers game anymore. It's more about strategy and reaching out cold to people. And that feels so awkward and weird. And so I think having someone that is up to date in current trends and technology, someone who's said, hey, based on my experience, you should do this, never do this. All the things like never use LinkedIn Easy Apply. Why is that a feature, right? So all of these things that I think having a career expert affiliated with a boot camp is extremely helpful to job seekers. Okay.
Yeah, totally agree on that. And I'm going to ask you in a little bit, some advice on the advice I've been giving out, because I'm curious, what a person that I consider an expert thinks about some of the things I've been saying. Because a lot of times I feel the advice we give is based on anecdotal experience, right? Evidence. So I'm I know a person got hired, or I got hired doing this. But then there's larger trends that I feel people like you, just based on sheer volume, probably see out there. They're
Exactly.
Working and not working. Yeah.
And I think that's so for example, an overarching theme I'm seeing right now just in the market is companies are taking longer to get back to candidates. It's taking people longer to get jobs. But I can tell you that because I'm working with over 200 people right now. I'm not just saying, I talked to 5 people and they're across different industries. So I do have a lot more data for all those data-driven people out there, just given my experience or given my own job search in recent years too, personally.
Yeah. I just came off the job search myself, but I'm in a different bucket of people now. I'm in engineering leadership. And so I had a couple opportunities I'm also in the San Francisco Bay Area where, working in person is easier because this is a tech epicenter of like the world. So there's just a lot more opportunity out here in general, I feel like, than let's say if you're in Arkansas or Iowa,
Right. And I do think
these are,
that another trend that I've seen with recent grads, whether it's Parsity students specifically or just other bootcamp grads, a lot of times they want their first role to be hybrid, or on.
Mhm.
They can really learn from people, in person. And I think that that's something that since 2020, that's not as readily available. So I think that that's something that, if you live in Arkansas, the opportunities for that, unless you want to relocate, it's going to be harder to find.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Speaking of like just general, like pretend I'm a boot camp grad and I'm coming to you. What are like the things you would generally tell me, like generic advice that you see people typically don't do that's going to help me? I've learned to code. Now I'm out there. I was a former, let's say, security guard. What is your generic advice for me?
So I think a few things. Unfortunately, it starts with your application materials. And so in
Okay.
today's world, that would be a fully optimized resume, fully optimized LinkedIn profile, portfolio if applicable, and GitHub, right? And so I
Okay.
think that in order to get in front of people, those things, people have to feel confident in that. And I've noticed that working with a lot of software engineers, particularly at Make School, a lot of students had imposter syndrome, or a lot of students would put projects on their resume that they weren't proud of, and therefore they couldn't speak to it. And so I think that that was, you put your capstone project on it. It
Hmm.
was, I worked with 5 people to do something I didn't even care about. It was just to complete the program. And so
Yeah.
I think that's one thing. I think another thing is marketing yourself as a novice, right? Like, I just completed this
Oh,
boot camp.
yeah. I'm
And
an
I
aspiring, passionate developer.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right. So I think it's more, I also think that people should try to do either some freelance work, or contribute to open source, because I think that also sets you apart from other people. Because back to what I was saying about all the other boot camps, right? It's a competitive market with all the boot camps out there. So if I'm a recruiter looking at resumes for all recent grads, what's going to differentiate you, which is things that you and I started talking about at Parsity, right? Trying to get
Hmm.
students to work on actual company code base and putting that on their resume, not just like, as I did this project for 2 months. When I
Yeah.
also worked at Make School, something that we often told students was, if you were to revisit a project, what additional features would you add? Or does it make sense for you to create a new project so you can confidently talk about it? Because I think when people don't feel confident in their application materials, they don't feel confident interviewing, and therefore they're just already in this rut.
That's a really good point. I've interviewed quite a few boot camp grads at the most recent company I was at. I did, something like, I don't know, probably 20 interviews, almost exclusively with boot camp grads. I made a decision to hire junior engineers. And one of the big issues was that they didn't give me confidence when I was interviewing them. You just reminded me of this when you said it, that I'd ask them, like, what was the project you worked on? And they'd um, kind of talk about it in a not so great way. They'd say, well, it's this easy app that I did. I'm like, why would you say that?
Right,
You
right.
know? And you're right. I think they just weren't that proud of the thing they built. And the reason I was asking that was to just get an idea of like, well, how do you think of a problem? It was more like just, and the people that did something, even if it was like a Netflix clone, and it was interesting how they spoke about it. He said, well, I built this thing and it, I had to learn X, Y, and Z to do it. And I was in charge of this particular piece of it. And that was interesting because blah, 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 blah. That gave me a
Mhm.
lot more confidence that they would do well on the team. But if they kind of start off, well, it's like a simple to do app that I built at my boot camp, I'm like, oh, geez, dude, you're not making it easy for me to
Right,
move
right.
forward with
And
you.
that's another thing too, is people often their first project they create, they don't feel proud of. And so if
Yeah.
you can't speak to it in an interview, then build something else or add a different feature to it or talk about it from a different angle, right? Like, the project that I worked on to complete this program was in XYZ industry, which actually happens to be the industry that I previously came from. So I already had that subject matter expertise to speak to it, right? So there's different ways. And also, interviewing is all framing. It's just how you frame certain things and what you
Yeah.
choose to leave out and what you choose to highlight.
Totally. Yeah. I did a big like workshop yesterday on interviews for the non-FANG. And for people out there hearing that word FANG, it stands for basically the biggest tech companies: Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google. And you can replace that with any of the top tech companies. I was talking about the interview prep you should do for that. And a lot of it is being prepared for these stories that you have to give. And I
Yes.
think you can reverse engineer it. So if you're thinking like, what would be a cool thing to talk about? Well, just go build that thing.
Yes,
There's nothing stopping
exactly.
you from like building whatever you want. You know what I mean? And I think about, you and the mentors at Parsity have been incredibly helpful for thinking about how can we best give our students like that advantage, and the suggestions for doing like externships, internships have been fun to do. And I'm just curious, like, how have you heard from students? Like, how has that helped them out? And is that just kind of what you have to be doing nowadays to stand out? Like, do you just need to find a way to work for free essentially to get validated?
I think it's a good foot in the door because in some ways you could work on the company code base. You could also interact with other engineers. You could also get some mentorship from them. It could also be a good networking opportunity for you. You could also target companies that are of interest to you. And I do think, unfortunately, in today's world, the pro bono aspect is just how it starts, right? But I also think that that's worth exploring and adding to your resume because then it also shows an employer other skills like you took initiative, you're proactive, you're a constant learner. I also think a huge terminology used once again at Make School is growth mindset, right? So once
Hmm.
you completed this program, then what did you do, right? Oh, I applied to 897 jobs. That's not a good strategy. So I think it's just, but also for anyone,
Yeah.
right? Like if you're a career pivoter or just in general, you always want to be constantly learning, up to date in current trends and technology, and just kind of aware of what else you can do to speak to in an interview.
Yeah, I am that person. I started off, I got my first job. I was not technically solid, and I had a lot of catching up to do throughout those first 2, 3 years, honestly. It did not stop. I felt like really almost 5 years into my career when I finally said, okay, I feel pretty confident now from like doing all this additional work to kind of keep up with people. Because a lot of your competition has CS degree, but not only that, they've been coding for a lot of their lives. I've definitely noticed that as a trend. A lot of people I talk to that are in tech, if you went to boot camp, you're likely going to be in the minority. You have a career that's going to span 20, 30, 40, 50 years potentially, depending on how early it is in your life that you're starting. You're going to
Yeah.
have to keep up with the other people. And eventually that stage between like getting hot, learning to code and getting hired is actually kind of short. Hey, let's say it's 2 years, still really short. You got another 25, 30 years of like writing code for a living. You're going to have to keep improving on your skills, or you just
Right.
probably won't have a job for very long.
And everything just changes so fast just in today's world. So it's just that's another critical piece.
Yeah, seriously. I sometimes think of coding as like the slowest get rich quick scheme there is. I'm like, yeah, you get a lot of money. It's just not going to be like overnight. It takes a lot of years practice doing stuff, job hopping, and then yeah, you can make all sorts of crazy money.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's another attraction to this particular role, right? Like sometimes I'm like, I'm in the wrong industry because career coaches do not get paid well.
That's a funny thing I think sometimes too. I'm like, it's pretty wild to me because, coming from the background I was in, I got into tech. I was making very little at first. I'll just be completely honest. I was making 60K in the Bay Area about 10 years ago. Not a
That
lot.
sounds familiar. That was my first job in the Bay Area, 55K, working
Yep.
on guitar.
And I was a software developer, and people were like, "Oh, you must be raking it in." I'm like, "No, man. I'm like starting at they actually gave me more than I asked for. I think I asked for like 55K, and they said, "Well, it starts at like 58." So I was getting around 60, and I was like, "Wow, this is great." And since then, I was able to crack, like around 200, and not including stocks and all that stuff. It's kind of wild to me the trajectory you can go on, but also what you cannot go on too. Because I'm like, if I had stayed there and just kind of hung out, I don't think I'd be anywhere near the salary I ended up, my peak. It was a couple years ago. So
Well,
that's
it's
the
also
other
another
thing.
reason people leave jobs, right? It's because it's way easier for you to get a new job and an increase in salary than hope that you're going to get a good evaluation and get a 2% raise because that's,
Yeah,
yeah, how it goes.
for sure. Yeah, that 3% to keep off inflation, or 2%
Right.
nowadays, probably, now that the market's in the employer's favor right now.
Yeah.
Um, I'm really curious about this one. I think everybody wants to know, like, everybody wants to know, is there some hack? Is there a particular technology that you've seen that makes people more employable right now on the market?
I would say, well, I think a few things. I think one, people are not having as much success messaging people on LinkedIn.
Oh, okay.
There is some success when it comes to engineering managers. I've seen that be more successful than recruiters or sourcers just because they're just inundated with so many messages. So I think that if you are to reach out on LinkedIn, reaching out to engineering managers has a higher response rate in my experience recently. And then I
Okay.
think that the technology, as far as, and I know this sounds like stalker status, but this is why these
Hmm.
this is using sites like hunter.io and contact out to find the naming convention of email addresses. And so there's
Ooh,
a reason why these sites exist, right? Because they exist so that people can reach out to people via email. And so I've also had success doing this. I personally have been in my own random job search these past few years, and I've reached out to people via email, and I have gotten responses and I have gotten interviews.
I never knew these sites existed till you literally just said them.
Yeah,
That is
they're
like kind of mind
free.
blowing.
They're free sites, and it just gives you the most probable naming convention of the email addresses, and it's worth a shot, right? Because right now, if you're an applicant and you just apply on the company website, who knows where they're at in the application pool, right? Like, are they already
Hmm.
offer stage, or do they have 987 applicants and your resume is never going to be seen? Did they lay off their recruiting team so they actually have a low head count of people that are actually viewing resumes with a human eye? So I think that the email reach out using those technologies is worth a shot.
That's really, I like that a lot. Yeah, any way you can contact a human directly,
Exactly.
it's it's great. I can only speak as a engineering manager. When I was looking through a stack of resumes, and I've said this a few times before, I have no clue how those got to my desk. 200 people applied or something. I'd get 20. I don't know who gave me those. Somebody put them in a queue for me to look at, and that was it.
Exactly.
I do not know. Now, if you had emailed me, and some people did, they were successful, and says, "Hey, I'm really interested in this role," and I'm like, "Oh, let me," and I'd find their resume, and I'd at least give it a proper look over because I feel like, well,
Exactly.
now I'm on the hook, right?
And then those people are also showing other skills, like I said previously, like initiative to research and
Hmm.
not be afraid to reach out, right? And I think that's another common theme too. People feel, I talk to a lot of people who describe themselves as introverts. And I'm certified in the MBTI, so I'm very familiar with what that means and how it's
Oh, okay. All
interpreted.
right.
So
Hmm.
a lot of people often tell me, like, I feel like a stalker. This feels weird. But in today's world, I mean, we're half living in a remote world still, and in order
Yeah.
to network with people, everything is virtual for a lot of networking.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's yeah. I just got accepted for a hybrid role in San Francisco, which is 20 miles from where I live. And the interview is all over video. I didn't go to an office. That is way different than it was 5, 6 years ago,
Yep.
where all my interviews were in person. You go to lunch and you meet the team,
Yep.
and there was this whole in-person thing that just doesn't exist anymore. Even if the company is next door, it's just going to be
Exactly.
on camera. Yeah. Yeah, you got to be a little more aggressive than usual because the optics of like being in an office and the performative aspect of like meeting people and dressing nice or whatever, it's kind of a little bit out the window. Like I might wear a collared shirt or something nowadays to at least say, hey, I'm trying to give the appearance that I'm a normal person. And
Exactly.
I can even have a script on my computer sometimes, which I use, which will outline the specific stories I want to talk about during an interview. Um, but
Which makes
yeah,
it
I think,
easier because then you have your, the tell me about yourself, your star stories, you have your resume in front of you, you have the job
yep.
description. You, if you need to share your screen for GitHub or whatever reason, right? So I actually think there's some advantages to that too. And you're also in the comfort of your own home, and just, it could be good sometimes.
Oh yeah, for sure. I want to get your advice on my advice because I give a lot of it out. I recently told people that I probably wouldn't give out my GitHub profile unless it looked like really good, and I felt like there's more to lose than to gain from having a GitHub profile. What do you think about that?
I think you should only share it if it's good and it's active and it's green and it's up to date. Similar, I have a similar view with portfolios. I think that sometimes people feel like they should create a portfolio because
Hmm.
they feel like they have to do it. But I think that it's only worth creating a portfolio if it's really good and if you're more of a front end engineer, because that's kind of what people want to see. So don't
Right.
create a portfolio that's just kind of like basic and simple and something once again you might not be proud of. And same with GitHub, don't put it out there unless you're active.
I, okay, cool. I'm glad we're kind of in line. I've given that advice out recently. I was like, am I off here? Because I'm like, I sometimes look at people's GitHubs and I'm like, I wish I hadn't seen that because I might have wanted to talk to you, but now I've clicked on something that I'm like, I don't know about this anymore. The code that I've clicked on here is not great, and I don't know why you'd want to share that with people. But yeah, I think why expose something you're not proud of to show people?
And I think the other thing too is I've worked with people who are a little bit further on in their career as software engineers,
Hmm.
right? So maybe like 4 or 5 years, I'm not getting their first job out of a boot camp. And oftentimes I'll ask those people, hey, what's going on with your GitHub? And kind of the overarching theme that I've gotten from that is I don't use it because they're obviously not working on their own projects, right?
Yeah,
And
right.
so
Working for
in that
company
particular
stuff.
case, exactly. So they're using the company code base or, they're doing things affiliated with the company that's under NDA or whatever. And I think that for those people, if their last activity on GitHub was a project they did 3 years ago to complete their boot camp, then don't include it because one, that's not impressive. And two, it just shows me that you're kind of like not active. And I would assume that the industry experience you're getting is more valuable.
Okay. Yeah, it seems spot on because yeah, my GitHub is fairly active, but most of my work is work, and it's just not going to be surfaced on there.
Right.
Here's a hot one for you. I am part of the 50% of people who don't like using the open to work green banner. And even recently when I was laid off, I didn't use it. And I have this weird mental thing about it. Like I'm thinking, what do I want? If I put that on there, will I seem desperate? And I think other people think that too. And I don't know if is it a right answer, but what do you tell people about that?
So I personally would never use it. I
Okay.
but what I tell people is I kind of give them what I would say the pros and cons. And at the end of the day, I tell them it's up to you and what you're most comfortable with. Me personally would never use it. I think
Okay.
that the pros of using it is you're more visible and it might be easier for you to make connections.
Okay.
Whereas if you don't use it, you're going to have to be hustling behind the scenes, right? Of you're DMing people telling them that you're looking for work or you're open to work. I'm sure you've seen all those saga posts about, I'm open to work and here's why I applied to 928 jobs and
Yes.
I'm laid off and all this stuff. And I often think a lot of those posts are not written very well, especially I think that the content that LinkedIn creates associated with it, I also think is not great. Not trying to be a hater
Yeah.
on LinkedIn, but I have a lot of thoughts on LinkedIn
Hmm.
too. But I think it's just interesting that it's a feature and available. But I always tell people, it's ultimately up to you. I'm not going to tell you what to do or not do. I also think that obviously, as you know, you can do it on the back end, right? Open to recruiters.
Hmm.
So that's what I would tell people to do. Put it open to recruiters only. And then that way, recruiters will still find you, but you're just less visible to your network. And once again, back to introverts, right? Like people who don't want their business out there, they're probably going to err on the side of not using the banner.
Yeah. Well, I feel good. I should also mention we didn't speak about this beforehand.
No, no, this is
I didn't know how
live.
you felt about it. Yeah,
Like this is
this is cool to
live, not
know.
scripted in the moment.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm kind of glad because I read some statistics somewhere that like 50% of people you say you should use it, the other 50% of people say you shouldn't. And I didn't have any hard evidence, but I thought, do I want to put myself in this camp of people? Because before I ask you about learning in public, which I'm really curious how you feel about that,
Yeah,
I have told people also these pity posts that get a lot of engagement. Like I've applied to a million jobs and no one's called
yeah,
me back, like you're just talking about.
yeah.
I'm like, I don't think that's a good brand for you to associate yourself with, in my opinion. Because like if that's your most visible post and it's about you hating the job market or something negative or kind of like a pity post, I just can't see how that's going to help you. But maybe it does. I don't know. Maybe these actually work. I assume they might work because people do them a lot. I don't
Yeah,
personally want to do
I have
it.
a lot of thoughts on that too. I think I was reading something the other day that said, as a candidate who is looking for jobs, it's actually not in your favor to say, I was laid off. This market sucks. Like, what's going on? That actually does a disservice to you. And
Yeah.
basically, whatever I was reading, it said, you're better off talking about your skills or talking about sharing content that is engaging and valuable, whether that's something you built or whether that's an
Hmm.
article you read or whether that's your thoughts on something that's trending, whatever the case is. But I would not advise people. And also it makes you look really bad. If you applied to even if you applied to 398 jobs, there's something wrong. There's something off. You don't have a strategy. Your resume is not targeted. You're not networking. You're not putting yourself out there. You're not attending meetups, whatever the case is. So it's
Hmm.
actually just a lot of red flags. And then regarding the open to work banner, I don't know if you remember this, but there was like a debate on LinkedIn,
Oh
maybe like
yeah.
6 months ago or something, and people were just like a lot of people were very polarizing, right? They're either all about the banner or they're not. And I just
I
remember
know.
for the longest time I was scrolling through LinkedIn and it was actually I felt like it was very negative because it was all about layoffs. It was all about the
Yep.
open source banner, and every content that I post on LinkedIn, I make sure one, it's professional, and two, it's more positive or more on the um like the glasses half full side. And don't get me wrong,
For
I've been
sure.
caught multiple times. Like I really empathize with people who were laid off. I totally get that. That's not my point. But I think it's
Yeah.
just more what's that value added content you're putting out there.
I really like you said that because I know that people are going to maybe get pissed off hearing that because I got a lot of really negative feedback on saying something similar. And I don't want to sound like I don't have sympathy because I was just laid off. I mean, I just literally went through this. I know how it is. I saw my team get laid off, and I've also seen most of them bounce back. I've myself bounced back. And I also knew that if I want you to win, right? If I'm talking to you and I genuinely care about you succeeding and getting to the finished promised land, which is a job, then I'm going to tell you the best advice that I can for that, just like you are. I mean, that's your mission, that's your job.
Right.
And I would never tell you to do stuff that I myself wouldn't do. And you can look at all my posts. I didn't talk about layoff or put a green banner on at all. I waited till I got a job. And I talked a little bit about it for content reasons. And that's because
Yeah.
also I'm a content creator. If I was just, strictly software engineering, I don't think I would even really mention it at all. I made a little
Right.
funny post about it, said no hard feelings, and there are no hard feelings. I liked my company, but even if I didn't, I don't know if I'd go around just exclaiming that everywhere. So I
Yeah.
hope people hear us when we talk about this, that we have like the best intentions for you, especially if you're listening to this. Like we want
Right.
you to succeed. That's the whole point.
Right.
Yeah. And so learning in public, I've gone back and forth on this. I was like, you don't need to learn in public. Like we don't need everybody to be a mini influencer. But now now I'm going back and forth. Now I'm telling people, you know what? I would learn in public, but with this caveat, like, don't care about likes and engagement. Like, just do it for the purpose, like you said, of describing work you're doing and hopefully to help you rise in the ranks of the algorithm to be searchable. That's my
Right.
general thought on it right now. What do you
I think
think about learning in public?
I think kind of back to people that describe themselves as introverts, they're not down for that. And I understand that, but I also think there's a lot of people. So, for example, LinkedIn lately has become very much of a social media site. And there's
Yes.
people I work with who have told me, I'm not a social media person. I don't have Instagram and TikTok, and I don't do any of that. So, why would I do that on LinkedIn? So,
Hmm.
I kind of tell people do what you're most comfortable with, because it's not for everyone. It's a social media site now, and it's just changed a lot. Personally, I think more for bad than good, because it's no
Yeah.
longer a professional networking site. It's very much more personalized, and I think it's the platform's changed. But anyway, I think it's good to learn in person, but I think there's this comfort level of what you feel comfortable sharing. I think a lot of people too, when they're creating content, just in today's world, it's so nuanced. Like there's so many trends on LinkedIn now about like, okay, you need to include emojis, you need to include photos. Like if you
Yeah.
But also, what's your goal, right? Is your goal to engage with people, or is your goal to just put yourself out there and, to your point, not care if people like it or don't like it? And of course, the algorithm, there's so many other nuances with the algorithm, but obviously, the more you post, the more you're active, the more you'll show up in feeds and you'll show up in other people's feeds. And therefore, when you're commenting on content, all of that, there's just a lot of other nuances related to the algorithm itself. But I think that if people feel comfortable, like demonstrating their knowledge on, I guess, primarily LinkedIn,
Hmm.
you can do it in other ways, right? You can write a blog, or use Medium and write a blog, or maybe you have a portfolio and you're just driving people to that site. So I think there's different ways that you can learn, but I think it comes down to what the individual is comfortable with.
I like that too, because I had to learn to get comfortable on LinkedIn, and I really only started using it for business purposes. I've been writing on Medium for nearly a decade now, of writing articles, and I've just seen the benefit of that. Took a really long time of seeing the benefit as far as getting traffic and things like that, but I saw the benefit of just knowing how to communicate technically,
Mhm.
by doing that. I think that was a huge benefit. That, who cares how many people saw it? I had, for years I had nobody. Then now I've kind of blown up off a few articles, but
Mhm.
that took years of time. But I do think you're right. Like, everybody's not going to feel the same about sharing stuff. I'm in a tech content creators group, and we're all complaining about how LinkedIn has changed too, because now we see that memes are getting prioritized, things that are just completely irrelevant to any professional material, but like memes are doing really, really well. And I'm like, I've never been a meme person, and I don't think I'm going to be, so I don't want to fake it to
Yeah.
do well on LinkedIn. All right, before I let you go, um, I want to talk about this specific horror story that I hear. We've kind of touched on. Here's the horror story that I've heard a lot from people. I've sent 2,000 resumes. I haven't got a single call back. I graduated from a boot camp. I know all this stuff. I'm actually really good at coding. What is going on? What do you tell this person?
It's going to be a variety of factors. One, is your resume targeted and focused? In the 6 to 7 seconds a recruiter looks at a resume, it needs to be crystal clear to me why you would apply for this job. So that's one thing. So your resume could be terrible. The next thing could be timing. And what I mean by that is, if you're applying cold online to all these jobs, you have no idea where they're at in the candidate pipeline. So there could be a world where your resume is great, but it's never being viewed because you applied to the role and they've already selected the candidates that they're moving forward with in the interview process. So that's unfortunately an uncontrollable factor on your end, because you have no idea what's going on there. So
Hmm.
those are two things. I think the third thing is, you're not using your network, or you can no longer just apply cold and hope someone's going to hit you up, because that strategy, it can work. I'm not saying it doesn't work, but it's a low percentage in today's market. 5 years ago, great strategy. But right now, you need to do more of like a two-pronged approach, whether that's like networking events, or reaching out to people, or asking someone to refer you, which referrals nowadays too are no longer guaranteeing conversations, which is interesting. It's
Yeah.
another thing I've been seeing. But essentially, the person who's applied for all these jobs, they have no direction. They're not targeted. They're not focused. They're not using their network. Their resume could be bad. The timing could be bad. They could be applying for jobs that they're either overqualified for or underqualified for. And in today's market, another trend I'm seeing is making sure that whatever you're applying for, you're like this ideal match, just because it's an employer's market right now.
Yeah. I mean, none of us have a crystal ball. Um, but it appears that the market is trending upwards in favor of employees, not just in tech, but across the board. Now, it's really hard to get a clear reading on that, but I have seen, like, according to like True Up, like I think there's a CompTIA just came out with a report, and it appears that things are getting basically stabilized back to, not like the boom we had during the pandemic, but essentially supply is beginning to meet the demand, which is not a terrible thing. It just means that the demand is no longer like twice the supply when people are just saying, we'll take anybody. It's more meeting it now, which means we still have good parity between the number of software developer openings and the number of software developers out there. but the standards have risen and it's still an employer's market. But what do you think? Like, what do you think about the future for software developers in particular?
I think that it's a good field to be in because every company needs it, especially in today's like technology driven world. I think
Hmm.
it's you're going to be able to find jobs at companies more so than something more niche, right? Like a career coach, companies don't need career coaches. They might have an internal mobility program, but it's actually quite hard to find a full-time career coach job. Whereas software engineers, I mean, they're all over. Obviously,
Yeah.
sometimes it's a little bit tough when it comes to like years of experience, or sometimes they actually want, that bachelor's degree in CS, right? So then that's going to narrow down the applicant pools if you're only a boot camp graduate at that point. So I
Hmm.
do think that it's a field that has a lot of opportunity across a variety of companies. I think as far as the market, I think it's kind of like what we've seen, right? There was the what was it? The Great Resignation, right? So the Great Resignation that
Yeah.
happened back, when was that? Like 2020, 2021.
Hmm.
That was very clearly an employer, a candidate's market. And right now we're in an employer's market. It's just a matter of time where it's going to shift back to the crystal ball. Who knows? Because it's partly related to the economy, partly related to, as you know, in 2020, all these companies overhired. And so we're
Yeah.
still like unfortunately dealing with the ramifications of that. And so eventually, when it evens out more, I think it will become a candidates market. But I think that, I'm part of some career coach groups as well that I'm pretty actively involved in. And
Hmm.
some people that I've spoken to recently are saying, like, I mean, once again, this is all just who knows if this is true. So don't
Yeah. Right.
be accountable to this. But, like
Yeah.
closer to end of year, things might be looking better. But you just never know.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, anecdotally, I've seen had a couple Parsity grads recently get hired. I've seen a couple people in my own circle get hired. Almost all the engineers that got laid off with me, most who were junior, have been rehired.
Mhm.
And but again, that's anecdotal stuff. I don't like to like look too deep in to that kind of thing. But in general, I also think there's an interesting metric or statistic I saw in a survey from Stack Overflow that most developers right now are like active software engineers are like under 40. And so for many of them, this is their first like bust. And I talked to a lot of engineers that are over 50 or in their 50s, they tend to have a much brighter outlook because they're saying, yeah, this is just part of the cycle. Like this is,
Mhm.
I've been through this before, and we're going to go through, whatever, some period, and then we're going to bounce back and go to another period of boom. And so they've been through the 90s or the early 2000s. So I've developers, this is their first taste of, oh no, the market's not like completely in my favor. And so I think that's another interesting thing to look at. But again, yeah, no one really knows what the future will hold. I mean, I'm telling my kids to learn
Yeah.
to code. I'm like, hey, if you, I'm all in. I'm like, if you want to, I think you should. I think you should be a full stack software developer. I love doing it. If you like doing it, then do it. If you don't, then don't.
Yeah.
kind of
Well, and like, I
kind of
guess
simple to me.
to the point that, most companies need it, right? And whether
Yeah.
you're a big company, a small company, whether you're in Silicon Valley or hybrid or remote or something, I feel like I go to job boards all the time and I always see some type of role. Once again, that doesn't mean that it's a junior, but it could be a senior or a staff engineer. I mean, there's so many
Yeah.
different roles within the realm. Or if you do some type of adjacent role where you're coding for 40%, I mean, you're still classified as a software engineer or developer within that.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. And people forget like junior developer roles are the shortest lived period. Like you're a junior developer for the shortest amount of time. You're a senior developer and beyond for the majority of your career.
Right,
Like
right.
that junior period is so tiny. Like, yeah, getting that foot in the door sucks. And like, but you're going to have to get in there and do that small period of time. And then the rest of your career is at senior where the majority of the job opportunities do lie.
Right.
Any last words of advice for our audience?
I think in today's world, don't be afraid to like step outside of your comfort zone and network and use LinkedIn. And I mean, for me personally, LinkedIn networking has led to articles I've been published in, podcasts I've been on, introductions, job interviews. I think that if you're able to find the right people and not be afraid to reach out, I think it's worth it. And I know, once again, it's scary. It feels uncomfortable. You feel like you're stalking people. But why does LinkedIn have who's viewed your profile? Why is that a
That's
feature?
true. That's true.
So that could also be an easy way to reach out to people, is if you do have premium and if you've seen who's viewed your profile and they haven't contacted you, you might as well message them, because it's very clear you know who's viewed it. So I think I would say just, yeah, don't be afraid to reach out to people and network. And another thing I always tell people too is, if invited, always take the call. Even if you're happily employed at your job, always take the call, because you never know, within, say, 6 months, something comes
Yep.
up, and then you already made a connection there.
I love that advice. I appreciate like everything you've said. You've been more candid than I expected, honestly. I really appreciate that. You keeping it real with us. I think you're one of the best parts of Parsity. You, the mentors, the team is amazing. It's really a stellar team of people to
Yeah,
work with. Yeah, especially you. And it's funny, I got this job, the owner of Parsity, through LinkedIn. That's how I met
exactly.
Aaron, the
Exactly.
owner. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a great it's a great way to. I've met so many great people on
Yeah.
LinkedIn. So yeah, it's a good place to be. Where can people find you online?
I would say just back to LinkedIn. I think that's the best. I mean, I still do Upwork on the side, as mentioned, top 1% talent on that platform still. But I think LinkedIn and Upwork are probably the best resources.
Not on TikTok doing funny dances or anything about
No,
career coaching yet? Okay.
I'm a lurker on TikTok. I should probably get active, but I'm a total lurker on that, so that would not be a venue for content. I was actually on a call last week with a bunch of career coaches, and something came up about how that's a great platform for, a 30-second video. Here's top tips on.
Hmm.
So that could be something I could entertain in the future potentially.
We'll do when you want to chat about that offline, you let me know.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Megan. Really
Yeah.
appreciate having you here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
That'll do it for today's episode of the Develop Yourself podcast. To learn more about becoming a software engineer with us, then check out Parsity.io. If you're not quite ready for that, then jump into our Dev30.xyz program, which is 30 days of working on your mindset, habits, and JavaScript skills. Totally worth it. See you next week.